This is TechCentral, and I'm Duncan McLeod. I'm joined on a Zoom call now by Katlego Maphai, the CEO of Fintech startup Yoco, which has some really interesting insights into just how hard the lockdown is affecting small businesses in South Africa. Kat, it's good to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Duncan. It's good to be here. Thanks for making the time.
Well, it's a pleasure. Before we get into the lockdown numbers and what you guys are seeing, for those who don't know Yoco, maybe just quickly take us through what the company does and why it's ideally positioned to understand what's happening in the real economy.
Thanks, Duncan. So offer a basic mobile point of sale solution for small businesses. So it's a little device that plugs into your phone or tablet, and it allows you to accept card payments. We've just made it really easy for smaller micro businesses to access the solution. They go online, they order, ship it to them in 48 hours or less, and they can start accepting card payments.
Great. So you're competing in effect with the banks when they're point of sale terminals, but I presume you're doing it at a lower cost.
Exactly. I mean, our real competition is cash. Our goal is to get business owners who weren't transacting before to start accepting card payments, and that's really where we focus.
Okay. Now, you did a big fundraising round about 18 months ago, I think it was now.
That's right.
Late 2018. And I think at the time, or last year, in fact, we spoke, and you said you were targeting, I think it was 100,000 customers within 12 months. How's the expansion going on the back of the fundraising?
Really well, actually. So we crossed the 80,000 mark in March, which is really exciting. And, COVID aside, we're well on track to get past the 100K this year.
Yep.
We need to see where we end up. But yeah, like the trajectory very strong, adding about 1,000 merchants per week, obviously prior to this crisis. So really excited about that.
Cool. So the reason I wanted to chat to you this afternoon, Kat, is I saw someone actually shared this image with me from Yoco. I'm not sure if you have a more recent version, but I'm going to put this up on the screen. And I think it just shows some interesting numbers here. So this chart shows the week before the tech lockdown, or before the lockdown rather, was announced, the days before the lockdown, and where there was a huge surge in economic activity, clearly, followed by an almost complete collapse in activity. Perhaps it's not unexpected to see those massive drops in post-lockdown, but it's still terrifying to see it in black and white like this. Maybe just take us through what we're looking at here, and whether you think the impact of this lockdown has been perhaps more severe than expected.
Yes, so I think first and foremost, as a company, we're in a unique position. We collect transaction data on micro and small businesses who previously were transacting in cash. So we have a unique insight into a part of the market that was fairly dark. And I think with this crisis, we think it's really important that we continue to share this anonymized, aggregated information to give real context and real numbers into what's going on. So that was really the thinking behind this. We have a quarterly publication, the Small Business Pulse. Here again, we sample our base, we share sentiment, we tell folks about what's going on. This is very much in the same vein as that. So just going back to the chart itself, yes, you can see the first bit was after the president announced the social distancing. Mm-hmm. And quite an immediate impact, and you can see it was food, drink, and hospitality that saw the biggest hit. Mm-hmm. Healthcare and retail having a bit more of a marginal impact, but you can see that the leisure type stuff took the biggest hit. And then just when the lockdown was announced, there was naturally a big spike in activity as people were doing their final preparations and getting to do things for the last time. And then post-lockdown, you just saw this dramatic fall off across all these segments. We've more or less seen things level off across these segments here. And we expect this to continue during lockdown. And then I think what's interesting about this is it's data that we want to continue sharing. And we're trying to frame it as a a small business recovery monitor. Right?
Right.
We've kind of hit the bottom now. And we can now, as things progress, as we get out of lockdown, we can start showing the market in real time how businesses are starting to recover. And that's really how we want to frame this now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the transaction volumes you see going across your network are no doubt a very accurate indication of what's happening in the economy. I was interested in looking at that graphic. Let me just get it back up on the screen here again, to see the fall off in retail post lockdown, because obviously some of the big retailers, well, of course, Yoco, I suppose, isn't represented in groups like ShopRite, Checkers, and Woolworths and Spar. You tend to focus on the smaller retailers, so that those wouldn't reflect in these figures.
Exactly. So, these are independent retailers, and where we are seeing transaction volume from independent retailers are the folks in essential services like the food retailers.
Yeah. It's actually surprising, perhaps, that the numbers aren't even worse than they are in this graphic. I mean, given that how few companies are able to stay open during this lockdown period or continue trading, certainly in the retail space outside of the main supermarkets, that those figures aren't down 95, 98%.
Spot on. And it's funny, when these numbers were first shown to me by the team, my immediate response is that I'm happy that we still have 10%.
Yes.
You're right. It's nice. My deepest fear was like seeing things go to zero. That would have been really hard.
Yeah.
But knowing that there is some sort of activity and that there is some sort of a baseline, and now we can almost start to anticipate the recovery and track it. That's just tumbling.
Yeah. And of course, as soon as the lockdown is over, I would imagine that there'll be a big jump to the positive again as people head back to the stores and buy things that they needed that they haven't been able to buy during the interim period.
I'd like to think so. But as a company, we are really trying to take a pragmatic view on this. You just don't know. So we're trying to avoid anticipating too much. And we're trying to rather use the data to tell us what's going on and to respond appropriately. That's been a bit of our mindset, because we just really don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if lockdown is going to be extended. We just don't know.
Yeah. Now, Yoco did some research as well. Let me get that up on the screen. PowerPoint document. It should be on the screen now. Just to tell us a bit about this research and when it was done.
Yes, so we did this research just after the social distancing was announced by the president.
Mm-hmm.
And, we sent this out to our base, and we were just trying to get a sense of sentiment, anticipation of how they believed COVID-19 was going to impact them.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see there that, once again, we do it across these core segments, that, the immediate response in anticipation was a heavy sense of being negatively impacted, partially negatively impacted, and then not impacted at all. And it's interesting, if you look at these numbers, right, 10, 5, 4%, they almost correlate with the transaction volume retention that we saw, which is quite fascinating. That
interesting,
the business see what was going to happen.
I'm curious about the relatively large number of respondents who said they'll be very positively affected. What do you attribute that to?
So this could be business owners who are doing any sort of delivery and remote service. They've seen some uptick here, and if businesses were already operating in a context where they didn't need to have any sort of human contact,
mm-hmm.
Now they were sort of getting the majority of the focus. I could see this driving a bit of the uptick.
Okay. Might be a bit of optimism ahead of the lockdown that hasn't materialized post the fact.
Yes, and also let's bear in mind, when we ran this survey, the details of the lockdown, in fact, that lockdown hadn't even been announced, right? We didn't know whether there was going to be a lockdown. And, essential services, all these things, we didn't know anything about that at that point in time.
All right. So let's run through a couple of the other slides in the PowerPoint presentation. This one shows by province. So what is this showing us?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. You can see that generally like sentiment quite correlated across the provinces. So the lines are moving in a very similar way. But what's interesting is Eastern Cape is a little bit standing out there. So, in terms of being negatively affected. But more or less, you're seeing, very similar sentiment across the provinces.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Eastern Cape seems to be a slight bit of an outlier compared to the others. In this, what are we looking at here? How you are preparing to adapt your business to deal with COVID-19. The majority of the respondents, or certainly most of the answers, suggesting move online or remote work.
Exactly. So yeah, you can see that a lot of the folks were kind of preparing themselves to adapt their business models to the new reality. And I think this is very important because even post-lockdown or in the new reality, it's quite important that business owners start to think about the reality that things may not be the same for the next while and that they need to adapt.
Yeah. Yeah. How's Yoco adapting? What are you guys doing during this period? Obviously working from home, but some of your customers are still using your products. How are you supporting them during this time?
Yeah, so we've been designated an essential service. We started working from home on the 16th of March. So after the social distancing got announced by the president. Fortunately, our business, all our infrastructure sits in the cloud. So we were literally able to continue from the next day without a hitch, which has been really helpful. And really, besides ensuring that we're supporting our customers who are currently transacting, and also doing a lot of community work in terms of our merchants who are struggling. So we've set up, online resourcing. We have eventing. We have community platforms. So really trying to create a sense of community around getting through this. And our next focus now as a business is from a product perspective. So a lot of our payments have focused on in-person payments, physical payments. We're doing a lot of work now to get into the remote world. So we're going to be launching a payment link where our customers can take remote payments. We're going to be looking at other virtual type payment methods. And we're working really, really, really hard to ensure that we have, the payment methods that our customers need coming out of this.
Great. Kat, it's always great to catch up. Katlego Maphai is CEO of Yoco. If people want to find out more about these numbers, do you publish them on your website, these trends?
We haven't started publishing them on our website. I mean, what we do have is the Yoco Small Business Pulse. So that can be found at Yoco/blog and under knowledge. So there's information there, and we have a bunch of things on COVID. And then we're going to start publishing these numbers online too.
Okay, great stuff. Well, I look forward to seeing more of these as the lockdown carries on and then hopefully gets lifted in 10 days' time. Although I have a suspicion it's going to continue for a while longer. What are your views around that? Do you think 21 days is going to be enough to deal with this crisis?
So in general, we've been taking a conservative view on everything and hoping to be surprised. So my sense is that there is a good chance that there is an extension on the lockdown. I think we're going to have to see what happens this week in terms of cases, if the curve is really starting to flatten. I think this week is going to be very telling in South Africa. But my sense is we need to take a conservative view. Hopefully things are better than we anticipate, but we need to plan for the worst case scenario.
Sure. Well, Katlego Maphai, as I said, is CEO of Yoco. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with TechCentral today.
Thank you so much, Duncan. All the best.